It started with a blouse I didn't recognize, dry-cleaned, delicate silk, still tucked into the skirt she claimed to have worn to her informal Zoom interview. That was the first crack in the glass. She said she never left the house that day, but the stiletto heel, scuffed at the tip and drying from a quick wipe, told a different story. There's something uniquely disgusting about the smell of unfamiliar cologne clinging faintly to your wife's scarf, as if another man left a signature you weren't meant to notice. And yet, I did, not because I was paranoid, but because I'm the kind of man who notices when 2 teaspoons vanish from the cutlery drawer without explanation. So when she came home that Thursday, glowing like a saint on ecstasy and rambling about career momentum and networking over lunch, I didn't interrupt. I let her play out the monologue, watched her mime sincerity with that enthusiastic little eyebrow lift she always does when she's lying. She told me the interview went well, even though the calendar on her phone had no event scheduled, just a 6-hour block tagged me time, which I found while adjusting her Bluetooth settings on our living room speaker. A strange coincidence, sure, but what really shoved the knife in was the email she forgot to close, half hidden behind Spotify, subject line reading, "Our little secret." Hey, I read nothing else. I didn't need to. The weight of that phrase said everything. She'd already crossed whatever line we hadn't talked about, but both knew existed. That was the real betrayal, not the secrecy, but the sheer mediocrity of her cover-up. She thought I was stupid. She thought I was the kind of man who could live with a lie if it was wrapped up in enough makeup and professional ambition. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry into a glass of scotch like some suburban Shakespearean tragedy. Instead, I cleaned the espresso machine, slowly, methodically, because I knew she'd come back to it in the morning and I wanted it spotless, just one less excuse for her to stay in my orbit. Then I made my calls. One to a college friend now working in corporate headhunting, another to a professional actor I knew who'd played CEOs in commercials. I told him I was casting for something unconventional. I wanted charm, poise, and the ability to sell a dream without actually offering one. Think Wolf and Armani, I said. He laughed. I didn't. Within 3 days, she had her dream opportunity delivered via email from a fake startup website I'd built in a single caffeine-fueled night. We even gave it a sleek name, Nexera, with a fake tagline about innovating passion. She bit the hook instantly. "They want a private dinner meeting," she said, pretending to be nervous. "It's a little unorthodox." I told her to go, to chase her goals, to be bold. She kissed me on the cheek and smiled like I was the best husband alive. It's funny how easy it is to look loving when you're already halfway out the door. The dinner was set at a rooftop bar in the city, the kind of place that charges $25 for ice cubes shaped like spheres. She wore red. Not just any red, our anniversary red. The dress I bought her 3 years ago after our trip to Florence. The one she said made her feel untouchable. She wore it for another man, not knowing I was watching everything. The audio recorder was in her clutch. The camera, tucked into a flower arrangement at the reserved table, captured every lingering glance, every giggle, every subtle lean forward. When the CEO leaned in and said, "We value intimate chemistry in our leadership team," she didn't hesitate. "I'm open-minded," she whispered. She meant it. But that's not what gutted me. No, what really slit the throat of my patience was the way she negotiated. Not for better pay, not for stock options, but for discretion. She wanted to make sure I wouldn't find out. The irony being, I'd already drafted the severance package, emotionally, mentally, legally. That night, when she came home humming to herself and telling me the interview was intense but exciting, I kissed her on the forehead and told her I was proud of her. Because I was. I was proud to finally know, without a doubt, that the woman I married had no trouble becoming someone else when opportunity called. Now all I had to do was wait for her first day at Nexera. She thought she was climbing the ladder. She had no idea she was already at the edge. There was a time, maybe 6 months ago, when I used to think we were one of those rare couples who actually liked each other, not just endured each other. We had a rhythm, a language all our own, built on shared jokes, routines, the kind of shorthand that makes life with someone feel like home instead of a war zone. She'd send me weird memes at work. We'd watch crime documentaries at night and pause every 5 minutes to predict who the killer was. She used to steal fries off my plate with this smug grin like she was getting away with something, and I'd let her, every time. I bought her favorite wine without being asked, She folded my socks in pairs even though I never cared. It was the little things, always the little things, that told me we were solid. And that's why it didn't make sense when the crack started, not with a bang, but with a faint hiss, like air leaking from a tire you didn't know was punctured. At first, it was the way she started waking up before me. She was never a morning person, but now I'd roll over and the bed would be cold, her pillow barely indented. Just couldn't sleep, she said, sipping tea in her robe by the window, eyes fixed on something outside that I couldn't see. Then came the notebooks, 3 new leather-bound ones she bought for journaling. I flipped through one when she left it on the table. Page after page of affirmations, self-love mantras, quotes about detachment and boundaries and becoming your highest self. My name didn't appear once. Neither did any word that even hinted at us. Still, I told myself she was just going through a phase. People change, evolve, grow. Maybe she needed space to recalibrate, whatever that meant. But it didn't stop there. Her phone, which used to sit face up on the table while we ate, was now always face down. She changed her passcode, claiming she had to for work security. She never had before. She started using the guest bathroom more, leaving the master pristine like a hotel room she didn't want to make her own anymore. Her perfume changed, subtle, sharper, something more assertive than the floral tones she used to wear. She stopped talking to her mom as much, stopped bringing up her sister's drama, stopped involving me in the messy, human details of her life. Our dinners turned into quiet chewing sessions filled with silence that used to be comforting but now rang with invisible accusations. She went out more, book clubs, yoga classes, networking brunches. Always female only, of course. I never pressed. I just kept nodding, trying to stay inside the frame of the life we'd built, even as she repainted it around me. Then there was the night she came home late with wet hair, even though it hadn't rained all day. Shower at the gym, she said, dropping her bag by the door, avoiding eye contact. She smelled like hotel soap. She kissed me like a stranger in an elevator, brief, polite, unnecessary. I noticed things. I'm wired to notice things. I saw the receipts she left in the car console, places she never mentioned visiting. Restaurants and neighborhoods she said she hated. A boutique hair salon receipt for a style consultation when she'd told me she was running errands. I found a single wine glass left rinsed in the sink one night when I came home early, too nice for her usual solo unwindings, too expensive to be casual. But I didn't say a word. I couldn't. Saying it out loud would make it real, and I wasn't ready for real. Not yet. I wasn't scared of the truth. I was scared of how long I'd tolerated a lie because I loved the woman telling it. Then her social media accounts locked up. Private. Suddenly, I couldn't see her stories. Her profile picture vanished. She claimed it was because of stalkers at work, said it with a dramatic eye roll like I was paranoid for even noticing. I laughed. I even told her I understood. That night she stayed up in the living room until 2 a.m. with her laptop open, the blue light reflecting off her glasses while she typed like a woman possessed. When I walked in, she slammed it shut and said she was writing goals. I didn't ask what kind. She kissed me on the forehead again, always the forehead, like a nurse saying goodbye to a dying patient, and went to bed. Alone. I stood there a long time, staring at that closed laptop, thinking about how something can look perfectly functional on the outside while rotting from within. That's always part of it. First the excuses, tired, stressed, busy. Then the avoidance. Then the sudden, mechanical attempt to be spontaneous, which felt less like passion and more like a performance review. I told myself we were just in a slump. Couples hit slumps. But there was no warmth in it anymore. No laughter. No teasing. No afterglow. Just silence and the sound of her getting up to take a quick shower immediately afterward. It was like I was touching a body that had been evacuated of someone I used to know. She smiled when she looked at me, but it wasn't real. It was the smile of a woman checking a box, fulfilling a role, managing a brand. The woman I loved had been replaced by something curated, optimized, distant. And even then, even with all that, I didn't accuse her. I didn't dig through her phone. I didn't scream or cry or beg. I waited. Because when a house creaks in the middle of the night, you don't run screaming into the street. You listen. You wait for the next sound. And deep down, I knew it was coming. It happened on a Wednesday. Not the kind of day you expect to be haunted by forever, just another gray, unremarkable Wednesday with nothing special about it, which is probably why the moment hit so hard. I was home early from work, an impromptu decision after a client canceled, and I thought maybe we'd cook dinner together like we used to. She wasn't home. Her car was gone. I wasn't worried. Not at first. I sat down at the kitchen table and mindlessly scrolled through the shared iPad, the one we mostly use for recipes and YouTube workouts. Her iCloud was still logged in. I didn't go looking for anything, I swear to God, not intentionally. But when the pop-up banner slid across the screen with a preview of her recent photos, instinct, not suspicion, made me tap it. There were new pictures. Not many. Just 5. But 5 was enough. The first was a mirror selfie of her in a black dress I'd never seen before, one leg cocked slightly, hips angled like she was advertising herself. She'd curled her hair differently, a style she told me she didn't like because it took too long. The second was a blurry snap of a wine glass on a restaurant table, opposite a plate of oysters and what looked like someone else's hand, masculine, unfamiliar, just barely in frame. The third was a candid of her laughing with her head thrown back. She wasn't the one who took it. The fourth was her hand on a wrist I didn't recognize, a watch I didn't buy. The fifth was the one that ended it. Her lips against a man's cheek. Not a kiss exactly, just the kind of soft, tender brush that lives in the no man's land between almost and definitely, the kind you don't photograph unless you're proud of it. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. My pulse didn't spike. It felt like being submerged underwater, too quiet, too still, the world muffled and foreign. I set the iPad down. I stared at the wall for a long time, long enough for the kitchen light to flicker and buzz, long enough for the refrigerator to kick on and off again. Then I checked the location settings on her iPhone, still synced. She was at an art gallery in a part of town she claimed to hate, the kind of place where pretentious installations hang from ceilings and rich men sip wine while quoting Nietzsche badly. She told me she was running errands. Said she might stop by her sister's. She had no sister in this city. I opened her calendar. She'd blocked out the entire day as therapy. I checked her browser history. There were no searches about mental health, no articles, no appointment reminders. But there were directions to the gallery, and the gallery's restaurant, and a hotel 2 blocks away. I opened the hotel's website. Reservations weren't required, but I checked anyway. Booked under her maiden name. Just one night. I didn't move. I didn't call her. I didn't smash anything or scream. I sat there, completely still, while my entire concept of reality twisted into something ugly and sharp. I thought of every conversation we'd had in the last month. Every time she'd said she needed to be seen. Every time she'd insisted on growth. Every time she'd pulled away just enough to make me question if I was overreacting. I wasn't. She was already gone. She just hadn't packed yet. The distance wasn't emotional anymore. It was strategic. Calculated. She'd been planning a quiet exit, a graceful transition from wife to free agent, probably hoping I'd make it easier by breaking down or blowing up. But I didn't. I wouldn't. What she didn't know, what she would never understand, is that I'm not the kind of man who unravels. I don't fall apart. I study. I adjust. I prepare. I sat at that table and ran every move she'd made in my mind like a forensic analyst reconstructing a crime scene. I stopped being her husband in that moment. I became her consequence. And the silence, the absolute, thunderous silence inside me, wasn't grief. It was the prelude to precision. The first rule I gave myself was simple: no emotion, no noise. If I was going to do this right, I had to become a ghost in my own marriage, present, silent, and visible. I started by memorizing her routine down to the minute. When she left, when she returned, when she paused near the mirror to adjust her hair in that particular way she only did when she wanted to be noticed by someone who wasn't me. I told her I'd be working later hours, hinted at a new project that required overtime, and she barely blinked, just nodded and said, "Take care of yourself." That was her first mistake. It gave me time. Time to study, to cross-reference her GPS history against her calendar entries. She said she was going to therapy on Mondays. Her car parked near a French bistro 3 towns over every single week. I ordered takeout from that exact restaurant under a fake name, had it delivered during her supposed sessions, and tipped the driver to casually describe who picked up the order each time. It was her. Alone once. Twice, not alone. A tall man with a beard, well-dressed. Always smiling. I didn't flinch. I just wrote it down. On Wednesday, she said she was going to her book club. I asked what they were reading. She said A Little Life. I looked it up. That book club had finished it last year. I waited for her to leave, then logged into our Wi-Fi admin panel. Looked up the MAC address of her phone, enabled tracking through the router. Her phone pinged from a hotel bar at 8:14 p.m. At 9:27 p.m., it pinged again, inside a room on the 5th floor. The next day, I asked her how the book was. She said the pacing was slow. Another mistake. That book's pacing is brutal and fast. I knew. I read it that night, cover to cover. I started paying closer attention to her friend Jenna, the one who always needed emotional support, and invited her for wine nights that didn't include pictures or tagged stories anymore. I sent flowers to Jenna's apartment with a note signed by my wife. Sorry about the other night, it said. I paid extra to get a call back from the delivery driver confirming someone else opened the door, a man. Jenna wasn't even there. That's when I realized the friend was a front, a convenient alibi, a shadow she could hide behind without question. So I followed the shadow. Not with my own eyes. I'm not that reckless. I hired a rideshare driver I knew from college. Asked him to be around her neighborhood at key hours. Pickups, drop-offs, usual spots. I told him never to approach, only to log what he saw. One evening, she left wearing sneakers. Said she was going to the gym. Came back 2 hours later in heels. Hair perfect. No gym bag. No towel. When I asked how the treadmill was, she said, relentless, and laughed. Strike 3. I started inserting subtle questions into our conversations, seats I could track. How's Michelle's new baby? I asked, even though Michelle had no child. A week later, she told a mutual friend she couldn't make the baby shower. Lies nested inside lies. I was playing a different game now. I got access to our joint financial statements and noticed something I'd missed. Weekly cash withdrawals just under $200, small enough not to raise alarm but consistent enough to point toward habit. She never used cash. Ever. I matched the withdrawal dates to hotel reservations, spa payments, and boutique receipts. She was building a life outside ours, funded by our money, shielded by my trust. I began preparing. Quietly. I backed up every photo, every chat log, every browser history timestamp to a hard drive she didn't know existed. I exported every message from her cloud account while she showered. The man had a name. Andrew. His photos were in a hidden album. I didn't open them all, just enough to confirm what I already knew. His face was forgettable. That somehow made it worse. She was risking everything for someone ordinary. No charisma. No presence. Just a vessel for her discontent. I even discovered the nickname she saved him under, A. The same initial from the email I'd seen weeks before. The final proof came when I asked if she could take my suit to the cleaners. I slipped a receipt into the pocket, from a place near the gallery, dated on the same day she claimed to be at a seminar. She never mentioned it. Just handed the suit back, freshly pressed, pretending nothing was off. That night, I lay beside her, listening to her breathe, steady and calm, and I knew something she didn't. This wasn't my wife anymore. This was an imposter wearing her skin, rehearsing a role, unaware the director had already changed the script. She thought she was fooling me. She didn't realize I was no longer trying to figure out if she was lying. I was watching to see how deep she'd bury herself before I pulled the earth out from under her. She walked into the gallery like she owned the place, heels tapping out a rhythm of entitlement across the polished concrete floor, her dress hugging the same curves I once called home, now dressed up for another man's appetite. She didn't notice me at first. Why would she? I wasn't supposed to be there. She thought I was at a late meeting downtown, stuck in traffic or nodding through quarterly metrics. She floated past sculptures and wine-sipping strangers, searching for someone she thought was waiting for her. And he was, just not the one she expected. I stood near the back wall, hands clasped loosely behind my back, facing the largest projection screen in the room. It was an art event, technically a private showcase. I'd rented the space weeks ago, paid a digital artist to design a looped series of visuals, shifting abstract colors, shapes, movement. But that night, for exactly 3 minutes, the display changed. One by one, the images faded into view. First, a picture of her and Andrew laughing on the patio of that rooftop bar, her hand on his thigh. Then, a video, her voice low, saying, "He still thinks I'm at therapy," followed by Andrew's chuckle. The next, a close-up of their hands intertwined across a dinner table, her wedding ring conveniently missing. She froze. I watched her eyes track the screen, pupils dilating, color draining from her face. Conversations around us died out as more people turned to look. Her expression collapsed inward, first confusion, then panic. She turned slowly and found me watching her. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Just met her gaze with the same silence I'd worn like armor for weeks. She walked toward me in slow, reluctant steps, like someone trying to disarm a landmine. "What is this?" she asked, voice tight, already trembling. "It's not what you think." There it was. The first card. I didn't answer. Just tilted my head slightly, like I was observing a specimen. We were just talking. You edited that to make it look worse. Second card, justification. Weak, predictable. You've been distant for months, she said, voice rising just a notch. You work late. You barely even look at me. What did you expect? Blame. The third card. She reached out, tried to touch my arm. I stepped back. Not dramatically. Just enough. Her eyes shifted, desperation giving way to a kind of brittle arrogance. So what? You're perfect now? You stalk me, spy on me, hack into my accounts, and I'm the problem. There was venom in it, a last-ditch effort to reclaim control. I let her hang there in silence, let her dig deeper into her own guilt, her own pathetic script. Then I spoke, calm, precise. I didn't need to hack anything. You left your entire betrayal on the cloud, right next to our honeymoon photos. She flinched, visibly. I gave you space, and you filled it with someone else. Still no curse words. Still no shouting. Just the steady voice of a man who'd already done his grieving and was now handling a body. She tried to say something, maybe another excuse, maybe a plea, but I raised one hand. Slow and deliberate. Not to hit. Just to stop. I want you to listen very carefully, I said, my voice dropping just enough to slice the air cleanly. This isn't the scene where you cry, or beg, or spin another story. This is the scene where you stand in the ashes of your own choices and realize the man you betrayed didn't just catch you. He buried you alive before you even noticed the dirt. Her jaw trembled. She looked around, as if expecting someone to intervene, to rescue her from the very consequences she created. The crowd had mostly moved away by then, sensing the weight of something irreversible. I made a reservation for two, I said. Dinner. Across the street. I figured you might still be hungry after draining every ounce of loyalty I gave you. Her lips parted. Nothing came out. She looked smaller now. Not physically, psychologically. The mocking confidence was gone, crumbled beneath the weight of exposure. Then came the last emotion, the one I'd waited for. Not guilt. Not shame. Fear. Real, pure fear. Not because she was scared of me, but because she finally understood what I'd become. I didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't ask why. I simply watched her unravel like cheap thread under tension, and I let her sit in that state of suspended disbelief. Her betrayal had been surgical, but my silence, my precision, was nuclear. And I wasn't done yet. I turned toward the gallery exit, but I didn't leave. Not yet. I wanted her to feel the weight of every second she stood there, unraveling, knowing this was just the beginning of what I had planned. She found me outside the gallery 20 minutes later, heels in her hand now, hair wild from pacing, mascara smudged just slightly, not from tears, but from frustration that her performance hadn't worked. You're really doing this, she snapped, stepping into the glow of a street lamp like some manic stage actress who missed her cue. After everything we've been through, you're throwing it away over a few pictures? I didn't respond. I just looked at her, quiet, unblinking, as if I were studying a language I'd already mastered and grown bored of. That silence made her twitch. Say something, she barked, stepping closer, voice cracking. You're just going to stand there like you didn't ignore me for months, like you didn't treat me like furniture? I tilted my head slightly, the way you do when a dog growls and you're trying to figure out if it's going to bite or back off. You smothered me, she continued, louder now. You were always there, just watching, always expecting something. You made me feel like I couldn't breathe. I met her eyes and finally spoke, calm, flat, surgical. That's because I knew the moment you had space, you'd fill it with someone else. Her face twitched like I'd slapped her. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. You know what? Maybe if you were a real man, I wouldn't have had to go looking for someone who made me feel alive. Her voice echoed across the street, sharp enough to draw the attention of a couple walking by. I didn't flinch. Then why did you hide it? I asked. 5 words. That's all it took to punch the air out of her lungs. She tried to pivot. Because I knew you'd twist it. You always do. You always make me the villain. She threw her shoes at the sidewalk, one clattering off into the street. You think you're better than me? You think just because you're calm, you've won. Her face was red now, her breathing ragged, but I stayed still, expression blank. You were boring, she spat suddenly, viciously, like a child hitting the last button they can find. You're a safe bet, a paycheck with arms. I wanted more. I deserved more. I nodded slowly. And now you have less. Her mouth opened, but no words came. You keep talking like I'm going to fight for you, I said, voice even. But I wouldn't lift a finger if you were drowning. Her knees buckled just slightly, a tremor running through her body as if she'd only now realized the gravity of where she stood. "You don't mean that," she whispered, panic bleeding through the cracks of her facade. "You don't mean it. You love me. You've always loved me." Her voice softened, lower, trying to conjure the woman she used to be when she wanted something from me. "We can fix this. People survive worse." I lost myself for a second. That's all it was. I stepped closer. "No. That's who you were when no one's watching." She backed up, stumbling slightly, hands going to her mouth, as if trying to physically hold the lion. "Please," she said, now almost breathless. "You don't have to destroy me." I shook my head once. "You did that all on your own. I just made sure the lights were on so you can see it happen." Her face twisted again, rage, guilt, desperation rotating behind her eyes like a slot machine looking for the right combination. "You're heartless," she snapped. "You think this makes you strong? You're pathetic. You'll die alone. You think being cold makes you powerful, but it just makes you empty." I stared at her for a long beat. Then, calmly, "Better to be empty than to be filled with rot." She gasped like I'd struck her, staggered back like something physical had connected. And in that moment, I saw it pure, undiluted fear. Not of me, but of irrelevance. Of being dismissed, discarded, replaced. "I'm sorry," she tried again, quieter now. "I didn't know what I was doing. It wasn't real. He doesn't mean anything. He's not you." I nodded slowly. "You're right. He's not me. He's stupid enough to think you're honest." She started to cry, not sobbing, not wailing, just silent tears slipping down her cheeks, as if mourning a version of herself she could no longer sell. "So that's it?" she asked, voice hollow. "You're just done?" I looked up at the dark sky for a moment, then back at her. "I was done the moment I stopped caring. Everything since then? Just clean up." She didn't respond. She didn't move. She stood in the middle of the sidewalk like a ruined statue, mascara smeared, barefoot, unraveling. And I stood there in complete silence, watching her fade, her power gone, her voice useless, her grip on me severed without a sound. She still thought she had time. That was her biggest miscalculation. She believed there was a grace period between exposure and consequence, a window where she could cry, plead, negotiate, maybe even seduce her way back into my good graces if she wore the right dress and recited the right sob story. What she didn't realize was that by the time those tears hit her cheeks outside that gallery, the gears were already turning behind the curtain. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, made coffee in silence, and began the execution of a plan I'd spent weeks crafting in the dark corners of our failing marriage. Step 1 was control of the narrative, control of the resources, control of the battlefield. I started by logging into our joint accounts and siphoning every cent that was mine, every paycheck deposit, every transfer from my side of the family, every investment I made in her name for tax reasons. Gone in an hour. Reallocated, diversified, frozen where necessary. She wouldn't even know until her card got declined at a lunch she didn't deserve. I left just enough to lull her into thinking she still had some autonomy. Then I called the dealership and reclaimed the car, my car, the one we'd put in her name temporarily because of a registration issue. I had the spare keys. By noon, it was sitting in the garage of a friend's place across town, title transferred back, insurance redirected, GPS tracker removed. I killed her phone line. Mine had been paying the bill all along, and had the account rerouted to a burner she wouldn't recognize, just long enough to intercept the calls and texts from A. I copied every message, every voicemail, every half-naked photo she thought was clever, and compiled it all into a timestamped dossier stored on both cloud and hard drive, labeled with a date she'd never forget. The utilities came next. I moved them to my name, then canceled the extras, Wi-Fi, streaming services, the subscription she used to maintain her curated fantasy. Then I made the call to my lawyer. No drama, no urgency, just cold, efficient execution. I told him to prepare the divorce filing with cause, adultery, evidence attached. He didn't ask questions. He'd seen this before. I asked for full control of the house, citing that I paid 90% of the mortgage. I asked for no alimony, no settlement, no spousal benefits. I wanted it written so that she left with exactly what she brought into the marriage, 2 suitcases and an inflated sense of self. The paperwork would be served within 10 days, with a delivery date coordinated to coincide with the rest of the fallout. Because revenge, real revenge, requires patience. I sent a message to her parents. Not aggressive. Just a link to a private drive labeled, "For your clarity." Inside were screenshots of her affair, hotel receipts, and one quiet, High-quality video of her laughing into another man's mouth. No commentary. No accusations. Just proof. I did the same with her sister, her two closest friends, and even her mentor at work. Then I crafted a separate message for her HR department, not a scandal, not a scene. Just a quiet heads up that one of their employees had repeatedly used sick days and company resources to conduct extramarital affairs during business hours, complete with attached logs of her client meetings. That corresponded with GPS data and restaurant receipts. I didn't accuse, I informed. I left the decision to them. Companies don't like exposure, especially from employees who pose liability risks. It wouldn't get her fired immediately, but it would haunt her. Freeze promotions. Kill recommendations. Slowly erode the pedestal she thought she stood on. While she sat at brunch, probably texting Andrew about how crazy I was changing the locks. Not just the physical ones. I changed passwords to all shared services, shut down her access to cloud storage, revoked her authorization from credit cards, digital wallets, car insurance, and the home security system. I wanted her to feel it the next time she walked into the house and realized the door didn't recognize her anymore. I even swapped the name on the mailbox, just to twist the knife with a little more precision. I wasn't loud about it. I wasn't theatrical. I was surgical. Efficient. Every piece moved at the right moment, each cut deliberate and clean. She would wake up one day and find the floor beneath her feet no longer existed, and the most terrifying part for her would be that I didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't even bother to explain. I simply dismantled the life she built with my loyalty and replaced it with the truth she'd spent months hiding from. And still, she had no idea. She thought the worst had already happened. She thought the gallery was the climax, the confrontation the finale. But that wasn't the end. That was the opening act. I was never interested in watching her suffer publicly, not in the way she imagined. I wanted her to lose everything while still trying to pretend she hadn't. I wanted her to sit in silence, staring at the glowing screen of a canceled account, wondering when the next domino would fall. I wanted her to realize that the man she betrayed wasn't weak or broken or desperate. He was quiet. He was planning. He was done playing husband and had become something far more dangerous. The fundraiser was her idea, an annual charity gala held at the Art Museum downtown, full of pretentious hors d'oeuvres and hollow applause, a playground for the socially ravenous to parade their curated morality. She had begged me to come this year, said it was important for her image, that it would mean a lot if I stood beside her. I agreed, of course, smiled, wore the suit she loved, held the door for her as she stepped into the grand entrance in that red dress she'd worn for another man's hands. She didn't know what was coming, but I made sure she would be front and center when it hit. The room was packed, clients, colleagues, her family, the friends who used to admire us as goals. We made the usual rounds, shook hands, posed for photos. She smiled that plastic smile of hers, the one she perfected in front of bathroom mirrors and borrowed validation. But I noticed it, how her eyes kept flicking to her phone, how her fingers trembled when they typed. Something was off. Something was wrong. The first wave had landed. One of the monitors in the corner of the gallery started glitching, momentary static, then a flicker, then a looping sequence of digital artwork that didn't match the brochure. No one noticed at first. But then the loop shifted, and a familiar voice played over the speakers. Her voice. Laughing. Saying, "He still thinks I'm at therapy." A few heads turned. Confused glances. She went pale beside me. "What is that?" she asked, her voice too casual, too high. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The footage continued, screens across the room now synced, like a coordinated strike. Her texts. Her photos. Her giggling, blurry hotel mirror selfies. Her voice saying, "It's not cheating if it doesn't mean anything." She froze. Laughter stopped. Conversations died. Her boss was in the crowd. So was her mentor. Her father. Her mother. Her best friend. All watching. I didn't say a word. I stepped slightly to the side, giving her just enough space to be fully visible in the light. She tried to laugh it off. "Okay, this is ridiculous. Someone's clearly trying to mess with me. This is taken out of context." Her voice cracked. Her hands were shaking now. Her boss looked at her with wide, dead eyes. Her mother stepped forward, face tight. "Is this real?" she asked, holding up a phone, her phone. I had sent them the private drive earlier that morning. Every piece of evidence, neatly categorized, irrefutable. Her sister turned away. Her best friend walked over to me instead, squeezed my shoulder gently. She looked at my wife with something close to pity, then turned her back on her entirely. My wife spun, desperate, reaching for someone, anyone, to anchor her. This isn't fair. You're all just going to believe some doctored video? You don't even know the whole story. Her voice was rising. Frantic. This is his fault. He's been spying on me, stalking me, he's sick. She pointed at me like I was the villain, like I had invaded some sacred trust, but no one moved. No one defended her. She turned back to me. Say something, she shouted, almost a scream now. I looked at her, calm, silent, unmoved. That's when it broke, fully, finally. Her lips trembled, her eyes glossy now with the weight of collapsing pride. She tried one last gasp, stepping forward, whispering, please, please, we can fix this. Don't do this to me. You're destroying me. Her voice cracked on that last word, me. It was always about her. Her image. Her consequences. Her ego. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just watched her unravel, piece by piece, in real time. Her world shrinking by the second as reality clawed through the fantasy she'd tried to maintain. The silence from the crowd was louder than any slap. She covered her face, shaking, stumbling back into a pedestal of glass art that tipped slightly with a sharp clank. Gasps. She caught it just in time, but that was it. Her last shred of dignity clutched in shaking fingers. She stood alone now. Everyone else had taken a step back, a step away. And I? I stayed, right where I was. My presence said everything her words couldn't rewrite. She looked at me one last time, really looked, and in that moment she understood. The man she betrayed had never needed revenge to ruin her. All he needed to do was let her truth breathe. She came at me like a storm, red-eyed and manic, flanked by her mother and that pathetic excuse of a man she threw her dignity at, Andrew, now sweating bullets by the door like a guilty teenager caught by the principal. We were still at the gallery, minutes after the last image faded from the screen, and the air was electric with whispers, phones half-raised, friends pretending not to listen but clinging to every syllable. You humiliated me, she screamed, her voice shrill enough to cut glass. You planned this. You set me up. You manipulated everyone. Her mother tried to hush her, but it was too late. The dam had cracked, and she was drowning in her own venom. You think this makes you a man? You think standing there all smug makes you righteous? You're a controlling, insecure robot who couldn't even keep his wife interested. Her voice echoed through the gallery as gasps filled the room, her own father visibly stepping back, face like stone. I stepped forward, finally, not yelling, just speaking loud enough for the entire room to hear. I didn't humiliate you, I said. You did that all by yourself. I just handed you a mirror. She lunged toward me, finger in my chest. You neglected me. You made me feel like nothing. I was dying in that house. Behind her, Andrew took a half step forward, then froze when I turned my eyes to him. Is this the part, I said calmly, where you pretend she didn't tell you she was married? Or are you the type of man who hears therapy and thinks it's code for a hotel room? His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He looked at her. You said you were separated, he muttered, and the whole room erupted, gasping, muttering, people shifting uneasily as her lie unraveled in stereo. She turned to him like he'd betrayed her, face twisted. You were just supposed to be. She caught herself mid-sentence, but the damage was done. Supposed to be what? I asked, stepping into the center of the chaos. Your emotional getaway driver? Your placeholder until you found someone richer? Or did you promise him the same thing you promised me, loyalty, honesty, love, only to sell it all the second you thought no one was watching? Her voice cracked as she tried to regain control. You don't get to paint yourself as the victim. You were never there. You were cold, distant, obsessed with work. I needed something, someone. No, I said, voice sharp now, commanding. You needed an audience. And when I stopped applauding your performance, you went looking for a standing ovation elsewhere. Her face contorted, wounded pride boiling over into rage. You think you're better than me? You think this makes you a hero? You weaponized our entire life, every moment, every conversation, just to make a scene. No, I said, turning to the crowd now, I weaponized the truth. Something she hasn't touched in months. Her boss was there. Her friends. People she'd lied to, manipulated, smiled at while stabbing me in the back. One of her coworkers whispered, "Oh my God," as if she just realized the person she'd been praising at brunch was a complete fabrication. Her best friend, former best friend now, walked out without a word. Her father looked at me, then at her, then shook his head and stepped away. You don't understand, she shouted again, tears now mixing with mascara. I was miserable. I was suffocating. You controlled everything. I trusted you, I said, finally raising my voice, just once, just enough to silence the room. I gave you a life people envy. I stood by you while you found yourself, while you lied, while you hid behind therapy appointments and fake brunches. And you took it all and burned it down because you thought you could dance in the ashes and I'd still be standing there, holding your coat. People were filming now. I didn't care. Let the world see. Let her lies rot in HD. She looked around wildly, as if expecting someone, anyone, to come to her defense. But there was only silence. Eyes. Judgment. Please, she tried again, quieter now. Don't do this. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything. You already did everything, I said. And it all pointed one way, away from me. Then I looked at Andrew, who now stood frozen in the corner like a deer in headlights. You should leave, I said. You're not a threat. You're just the last chapter of a very long mistake. He slinked out without a word. She tried one last time, stepping toward me with a hand outstretched. Please. I love you. I leaned in close, just enough for her to hear. No, I said. You love yourself. And now even that's gone. She broke then completely, crumpled like paper in front of everyone, sobbing, gasping, begging. Her mother knelt beside her, but her father didn't move. He couldn't. I walked out slowly, never looking back, not because I needed to prove anything, because there was nothing left worth seeing. It didn't take long for the pieces of her perfect little life to come crashing down. The gallery night spread like wildfire, whispers became posts, screenshots became viral ammunition, and by the time the weekend hit, she wasn't just a woman who cheated, she was a local legend of self-destruction. Her employer, once so proud of her potential, quietly terminated her for violating company values. No severance. No recommendation. She tried to file for unemployment, but I'd already sent them the logs tying her absences to her weekday rendezvous. Friends who once toasted her ambition stopped answering her calls. Group chats were silent. Posts went up without tagging her. She was no longer someone people associated with success, she was a cautionary tale. Her social media presence, once a curated gallery of filtered bliss and brunch selfies, turned to dust. Unfollowed. Unfriended. DMs unanswered. The only people still watching were there for the crash. And crash she did. She moved out of the city within a month. Rumor had it to some rental unit 3 counties over, where no one knew her name and no one cared to ask. She found some job beneath her front desk at a third-tier co-working space, or something equally forgettable, barely enough to scrape rent and utilities. Andrew? Vanished. The second the spotlight turned harsh and the flirty lies gave way to real consequences, he deleted his number, ghosted her completely. Apparently he'd had a girlfriend all along. Fitting, really. Betrayed by the very kind of man she thought she was getting away with. Her parents stopped speaking to her entirely. Her father never forgave the shame she brought to their name. Her mother wrote me a letter. A real letter. Apologizing. Thanking me for not hiding the truth. Saying she wished I had been their son. Her sister blocked her on everything. One of her cousins, who used to idolize her, publicly called her toxic on Facebook. I didn't follow the drama. I didn't have to. It always found its way to me. Then one night she called. No caller ID, but the silence that came when I answered told me everything. Then the breath. Then her voice, barely a whisper. I still love you. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just those 4 words, trembling under the weight of everything she'd destroyed. I didn't respond. Not at first. I let the silence breathe between us, let her sit in it like a coffin she'd nailed shut herself. Then I said, strange. I don't even remember your name anymore. And I hung up. That should have been the end. But a week later, she showed up. At my door. No makeup. No poise. Just a rain-drenched mess of a woman, clutching a wrinkled jacket and looking like a ghost trying to find where she'd been buried. Please, she whispered, can I come in? I just want to talk. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw nothing. Not pain. Not beauty. Not even anger. Just a stranger. And the door stayed shut. She cried there, right on my porch, crumbled to her knees. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink. Because I wasn't hers anymore. I was free. And she was just a memory that hadn't yet realized it was dead. So I spoke one last time, voice calm and final. Go. Before the neighbors start wondering who let the trash walk back to the curb. I closed the door. That was the last time I saw her. She faded after that. The world stopped saying her name. No more drama. No more whispers. Just silence. And peace. And to everyone who's made it to the end of this story, thank you. I appreciate you listening. Tell me where you're from. and let me know. Did it hit as hard as it should have?